bring you in downstairs.
So welcome everybody. As you come in, don't forget to mute yourselves. And you can go ahead and put your name and location in the chat, along with what kind of birds have you been hearing lately? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our first in the Lincoln City Nature Challenge speaker series. My name's Allie Mays. I'm the community science specialist with Nebraska Game and Parks. And if you're just joining us, remember to please mute yourself. And you can also share any questions you have in the chat. And we'll be stopping periodically to check in on those questions and get them all answered for you. So I'm very, very excited to introduce Jason, the Birdnerd Sansevere. Oh, I butchered it, Jason. I'm so sorry. we practiced phonetically saying it earlier and I still failed. It's okay. Anyway, I'm really excited to hear Jason. If you haven't had a presentation with Jason before, he is amazing, very funny, and also very talented at making bird noises. So take it away, Jason.
Awesome. Thanks, Allie. I'm excited to have so many folks coming in. I see some names I recognize and folks from around the country, not just right here in Lincoln. And we get to talk about my favorite thing, which is birds and bird noises. Birding by ear is a specialty. I think it happened because I'm a musical kid, grew up with music all around me and singing. And so bird noises was just something I was really drawn to. So I'm excited to present with you all tonight. So real quick, I want to put these up. Couple of rules for presenting with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. Just take a quick chance to read through those. Just make sure if you're putting anything in the chat, especially, be careful what you say. The amazing Allie Mays is on and they'll be watching the chat for us too. So we are all set. All right. And this is what I am presenting on, a little bit of what to expect. As Allie said, there will probably be some bird noises, hopefully a lot of them, some made by my phone, some on video clip, and hopefully several made by my own mouth in some strange way, whistling, shouting, something like that. We'll see how well those go. And as she said, also, this is all kind of leading up to the exciting thing at the end of the month, the City Nature Challenge. And Lincoln is doing that again this year. We're especially challenging ourselves to see if we can beat the amount of observations that we had last year and get so many more into iNaturalist. Some other things that you're going to expect tonight are, I'm going to give you a real quick intro to what the City Nature Challenge is and how to use iNaturalist for it, and show you the speaker series calendar, the rest of the evenings coming up. Then there's going to be lots of birds and lots of sounds. I have probably more than we can fit in an hour because I like birds. So I'll try to zoom through them, but there might be a few that we miss. But I will also try to make sure I leave time for questions at the end. And I'll remind everybody about some of the things we talked about, and that April 30th through May 3rd is the Lincoln City Nature Challenge. We hope you all participate. It's going to be fun. It was a lot of fun last year too. So let's keep moving. There's that info right there, all about the City Nature Challenge. It is, if I am correct, international now. It's not just national, but started out on the West Coast. I believe it was Los Angeles versus, oh, I forget the other city.
San Francisco.
Thank you. but it's a really, really fun and easy and great way to just get people outside, from school kids to seniors to anybody, to just start observing nature, especially in the spring as everything is growing again. And it's really easy to participate. If you've got a smartphone, you can just like click on that. And even if you don't, if you take other photos, sound recordings, you can load them up to your home computer and still get them into iNaturalist that way and help the count. Lincoln is doing this all around the city of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And it's going to be lots of fun. I can't wait. I had so much fun last year. There's the speaker series. So I left myself off. We're on that one already, but we've got some really great talks going on through the month to get us excited, to get people more into how they can use iNaturalist, what kind of animals and wildlife and plants they might be seeing. I mean, we've got one on fungus. We've got to talk about what you might find just in your backyard without going very far, to our very last one, which is going to be helping you learn about how to use iNaturalist and participate. All right, let's see, what else do I have there? Basically, though, what the City Nature Challenge is you make an observation of nature, you take a picture of it or a sound recording of it, if you can. Sometimes the birds move a little fast, and you put it up on iNaturalist, and then later in the week, some experts get together and like confirm what that species is, and we try to see if we can see the most species. A lot of times, if it wasn't COVID times, we would challenge another city. So we sort of challenge Omaha once in a while, but they seem to have a lot more people. So this year we're really focusing on challenging ourselves, trying to get more observations of more nature and get more people involved and get them outside exploring. Tonight is all about the birds and the sounds that they make. So there's going to be a lot of this little silly balloons coming up with what birds say or what the books tell us they say. And then I might tell you what I think they say. But here you've got a lovely little Carolina wren and a yellow warbler on the other side with their little mnemonic devices there, talking about what they might be saying. Real quick before we get in, since we're going to talk about bird sounds and we're going to hear a bunch, and I'm going to make some things to listen for, especially if birding by ear is new to you. Listen for pitch. That's how high or low is the noise that you're hearing. Listen for quality. That's like, is it clear like a flute, like a cardinal, or is it buzzy like a clay-colored sparrow, which makes this little noise, right? Very different quality to that sound. Is it long or short, right? What's the length of the sound you heard? Is it a really short chip, right? Or is it like a Carolina wren, tea-kettle, 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 almost always kind of that length? Or is it a really, really long, like house finch who's really excited and he's singing for like 3 minutes straight because he loves his tree, right? Listen for repetition. That's a good thing to notice. Some birds repeat the same thing over. Some of them just keep singing all kinds of different noises, right? If you listen to an American goldfinch, it warbles all over the place. Or if you listen to this yellow warbler, it kind of does that song over and over, but it's the same repetitive rhythm or pattern, right? Sweet, 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 I'm so sweet. Very cool. Just a few things to think about when we're listening to birds. All right, the way I grouped our birds tonight that we are going to listen to, we're going to look at them, of course, too, because we want to try to get pictures of them if you can. But sound recordings work just as easy on your phone. If you get a chance, if you don't have iNaturalist yet, I would download it and play with it before the City Nature Challenge. You can learn a lot by just fiddling with it. But just as easy as it is to take a picture with it, you can also just hit the take a sound recording and it does it for you. It hooks right through your phone and takes that. You can take the recording though before and not even be an iNaturalist, and you can just say upload the sound recording too. The way I put the presentation together tonight is we're starting with the birds who are already here or who have been here all year long, and you're probably already hearing. And then we'll kind of move through some other birds you might be hearing, but that don't make maybe as much noise or that we kind of forget, onto those birds that will be coming right near the end of the month to this area of the country and arriving just in time to be heard for City Nature Challenge. Let's start with a few that I bet you're hearing right now, which I know I saw in the chat already, which is the northern cardinal. If you're not hearing one right now, you must be way out west where they don't have them because they're so loud right now. The males have been singing for territory for at least a couple of weeks already, mainly because they're residents. They don't go far, if at all, migrate at all. So they're already here, setting up territory, and that have that very famous song. This is one that I can do with my voice. I'll try it. And the mnemonic device usually says, they say, purdy, 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 goes. That's one of their songs. Now, depending on what part of the country you live on, it can be very different. It can be faster, slower. I'm going to play it on the phone file too, see if you can hear this. Right? It does sort of sound like purdy, 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 right? And it's an easy one to remember because he's pretty, and it's kind of like he's saying that, right? I'm purdy, 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 when he's looking for his mate. Tricky, some other notes to listen for. They can do that almost double time, and it sounds like a little laser gun, right? Sometimes can be confusing. And what's really exciting about cardinals is Mrs. Cardinal sings too, right? Female cardinal sings too. I love this. We're doing a big thing at Audubon right now where this year here at Spring Creek Prairie, we're really focusing on female birds for a lot of our programs because they get overlooked. A lot of times they're hiding, they're camouflaged, but there's so much missing scientific information about them, mainly because they're just not as studied. But cardinals, female cardinals, are one of the species that do sing for the female. She can sing the song almost exactly like his, and it's slightly higher. And I've got a recording of a paired duet, so listen to see if you can tell the difference. The female sings first, and then the male, and his notes are a little bit lower. The girl again, and that's the male. Isn't that cool? I love that. I love just knowing that we've got birds right here that duet and in the spring. Now, they usually don't do that if they're not mated. From what I understand with cardinals is the cardinals will do that once they're already a pair that has made a bond and are making a nest or have decided to mate. They usually don't do it. He'll sing for territory and find a mate first. And then once they've decided that that will work, then they may sing their duet. So something to watch for. The other last thing to about cardinals to listen for is what I call the tink, right? It's just this little, it's their call note, and it's just a very metallic kind of note. I try to use the word PIT, like saying pit really fast with a lot of air moving through my mouth. But it sounds like, is it gonna go? Hold on a second, my phone stopped working all of a sudden. There it is. Hear that really loud metallic chirp? That's a very cardinal noise, and not pretty much any of the other birds, at least in the Lincoln area, make that loud of a call note to each other. That's usually just for communication, but it sometimes is when you can't see the bird. They're hiding in the shrub or up in the tree. You will definitely hear that metallic noise. All right, another bird you're probably hearing right now, extremely early in the morning, right, is the American robin. One thing about this is think back to those tips I gave you. If it's a long song, could be a robin if you're not sure what they sound like. They tend to sing a very long song and keep kind of going. And the mnemonic for it is cheer up, cheerio, or it might be the opposite, cheerio, cheer up. The rhythms can be back and forth, but it kind of sounds like this. And it just keeps going and going, especially if he does not have a mate yet. It can go quite a long time, way before the sun comes up, all the way into the morning. It's a really, really cheerful noise. Another common noise that robins make that you may not know is their alarm call. They make it a lot when they are together, a pair, and one sees danger and will call to the others, or if they've already got little ones hatched in a nest, you may hear them do this. Those little chip notes are usually them talking to each other that something is up. So listen for that too. It's a great way to tell a robin is around. And you can't miss, if they're in the area, blue jays, of course, right? Super loud and noisy. Most famous is their usual loud kind of squawking call. They don't really have a song, it's all calls, but they're very noisy because they're very social. Blue jays work in family teams of 4 to sometimes 6 and 8, kind of like the rest of the jay family, the corvids, right? Jays, ravens, crows, they work in teams. So they communicate a lot. So less song and more of a right, really loud calls that they make. Especially if you hear a bunch of them all making that, run out and see what they're making the stink about. It could be a predator on the ground, or it could be an owl or hawk in the tree. Almost every owl I've ever found that wasn't making noise, like especially in the day, was because blue jays or other birds were mobbing it and trying to get, chase it out of the neighborhood, making all kinds of noise. Blue jays can be really tricky though, because so many other noises can they make, right? They can make the sound of a red-shouldered hawk, a red-tailed hawk. They make this really great one that they always bounce up and down when they do it. Like this, they go, it's like this little rusty gate noise. And also, like the rest of the corvid family, they can actually make a sort of purr. That's what it's called. It's not made the same way as a cat purr, but it's this kind of, I can't even quite do it. It's just a little tremolo back in their throat. And it's more when the family is talking to each other, especially pairs. Really fun birds if you got blue jays around to actually watch. Take some time and learn their vocalizations. I think you'll be surprised at all of the fun noises that they can make. They get a bad rap because they also, when they work in teams, can figure out puzzles. They can figure out how to get into someone's cat food or, garbage, things like that. So, but they're cool. All right, couple more common loud singers that are around right now. There's a lovely male mourning dove. You know it's the male because in the mourning dove world, he's wearing the makeup. He's got the blue around his for eyeshadow and the pink shiny feathers around his neck when he blows it up to sing. Now for this one, I have a fun little video because it has 2 noises in there, and I'm going to see if this will work. Let's see, I want to do this. You're already seeing my screen. So if I do that for a second, and then if I do this, and then this, oh, but I want to go share, sound is shared, good. So you should be all seeing mourning doves now. Remember, not named for the time of day, even though they do sing in the morning. It's because the call that you're about to hear, they thought sounded like a really sad kind of mourning, call, like coo. What I want you to notice in this one, it's not super loud, so listen close. You'll see the male here kind of sneak over near the female. He's courting her, and he'll coo several times. But when she flies away, big surprise, listen to the sound of her wings. That's another very common sound that you can tell is a mourning dove by the wing flatter when they fly up or away. There it was again. Not a super loud video, I know, but hopefully you heard there that famous call from the mourning dove, right? The right? Don't get confused with another dove that we might hear later on in the presentation. It usually doesn't go up the other bird. It kind of is all one note, more like an owl. Both dove species once in a while get confused as owls, but usually not calling at the same time of day. But I hope you could hear that cool wing noise. You can see there in that final picture too, the real difference in the coloration. In the fall, they pretty much look like the same, male and female. But boy, in the spring, he's got all this pinky sheen to him. He gets really very pretty for the girls. All right, let's get back to the presentation. Here we are. I gotta go like that and like this and like that. Whoops. So we already talked about him. We saw that. Another one is the house finch, one of my favorites, because I swear, no matter how I'm feeling or if I've had a long day, house finch song makes me happy. They have this just lovely little happy song. I can whistle a little bit, but I'm going to find it on my phone because it's very varied. It's very variable. It can be very different on what part of the country you live, etc. It tends to almost always, not always, but close to always, also end as it babbles around with a zzz at the end, a little Z or a buzzy that goes upwards. So if you hear somebody going at the end, it's usually a house finch. But let's see if I can play a good version of it for you. There's that buzzy right at the end. Very happy little song, just makes you smile. They also have something that you could get it confused with when they're not singing, is they have a pretty common just one note little chip, just chirp, chirp, chirp. It can sound a little loud like house sparrows, but the more you listen to them, house sparrows usually has two notes to it. Chirp, chirp, it's almost two. Chirp, chirp. Whereas house finch is usually just one. And I think I have that here somewhere. Let's see. Yeah. It's just kind of like one chirp. We'll compare that to the house sparrow a little later, which usually has two notes to it. Really cute little birds. All right. Carolina wrens, like we said right at the beginning. Now, again, can be tricky because they don't always do the full tea kettle, tea kettle. Sometimes I swear it's just kettle, kettle, kettle. I don't know. They just didn't want tea that day. I don't know why. But literally, it can be really fast and just be two notes, deedle, 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 which can be confusing with titmice. But we luckily around here don't have very many tufted titmice. So it's usually a Carolina wren. You certainly know it's a wren because he can be 3 doors down and you'll still hear how loud he is. The female will call back too. I don't think she sings the full song. They also have very loud warning notes, right? They'll make all of these crazy noises and let you know they're there. They're not shy. They will also be sitting on the fence or on the low tree branch, yelling those songs right in your face. So I love wrens because they're all about, you know, being a noisy neighbor. It's fun. And one that's arriving, not here in Lincoln yet, within the next 2 weeks probably, but will also be loud. But and similar to that house finch, it almost always gets described as bubbly, and I think that's right. Is the house wren. Very similar in look, but more overall brown, right? Not that bright rufous on the back with the white eye line, kind of much more pale, very striped. These little house wrens in wilderness park or any shrubby area, woody area, will just be babbling like nuts in no time. Let me find their song for you. This is one I don't do well with my own mouth, so I'm going to have the actual bird do it for you because it'll be way better. So what to listen for there? It's very bubbly, but if you compare that to that house finch, the house finch was a lot more kind of melodic notes going up and down and up and down and around. Whereas I feel the house wren's got like 3 little, it's got a bunch of buzzes and some like repetitive notes in a pattern. Like, so it's kind of different that way. They're really fun though. And then they also do that a lot. When you come near them in a shrub or a tree, they get really angry about it. They've got all kinds of fun noises. Their little tiny tail usually sticks straight up when they're making these noises. Wrens are really, really, as they would say, vociferous, right? They like to sing and talk and always do. So I always find it a surprise if anyone misses a wren out on the trail because they want you to know they are there. Very fun birds. Great ones when you're on a beginning birding walk because you almost always will see them and hear them. All right, so that was the kind of common birds that for sure you just shouldn't miss hearing, and I bet you can get some really fun recordings of. I put a group of invaders here, right, because they do make some really fun noises. These are the birds that are not from the country, right? They're an invasive species, but they're pretty all naturalized. They're all over the place. And especially for a city nature challenge where a lot of the birds might be very urban, we're going to see these and hear them. So knowing their sound is important too. So house sparrows don't have much of a song, but they have that little note. I'm going to find that for you real quick. Because see if you can hear what I hear. And again, not everybody hears the same. So if you are reading the book and it says, this bird says this, you're like, I really don't hear that. Write down what you hear and you'll remember it more. I've got an example of that coming up. A bird that the book told me it said something. I thought that was dumb. So I changed it and now I never forget what it sounds like. So do you hear how that's a couple notes instead of just one chip? Yeah. It's always a little chirp, chirp, chirp. It's kind of like two notes instead of just the one for the house finch. They can be in very similar territory, so hearing those two can be tough. They don't make a lot of other noises. They do talk to each other, but it's almost always one of the lead males that's making the noise. House sparrows have a very different social pattern than a lot of our other birds. They're much closer related to the weaver finches over in Africa and the Old World. And they, it's sort of a military style social system. So you'll have like a general, they get more, the adult males will get more and more of a black bib all around the front. And they pretty much tell everybody else when they can dust bathe and when they can go to feed and what they should be doing right this second. Sometimes if you've watched them close, it's not very friendly either, but they are around. They're a very successful bird and they do make a lot of chatter. So don't get confused. If you see one around, they are, the females especially, pretty much the most drab of the sparrows. So if you see a sparrow and you're like, well, I don't see much markings on it at all, could be house sparrow. One of my favorites of the invaders is the Eurasian collar dove. And it's because as much as talk about successful, I mean, people talk about starlings, who we're going to talk about next. Eurasian collar dove has beat that record. They have spread across the whole continent, like literally in no time. It's only been like 20 or 30 years. It's like crazy. So very successful birds. And I sort of think that the male's call is rather hysterical because it sounds like either he's got a cold or he's been smoking for too long and shouldn't have been, and he's got a little rasp in here. And so it's like, whoo, 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 whoo. So that's what it sounds like to me, the way I remembered it the first time I saw it. But again, like the mourning dove, the only thing you really would probably mix it up with, it doesn't go up or down in level, right? It's all on that one note, whoo, 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 kind of all right there. Fun birds though, they're much larger than mourning doves too. If you happen to see them together, they're much bigger and much sort of whiter up front. The whole breast and head are much whiter to light gray, whereas the mourning doves are kind of that fun tan, medium tan and pinks and blues. And finally is European starlings. This one, I'm not even going to do any noises for you because literally they can make almost any noise they want. I have been lucky in my career to move across the country in many different places. All of them had starlings and all of them made different noises. So the ones here, I hear one noise the most, which is this sort of like descending whistle. They tend to do this when they're talking to each other in groups, but there's so many other noises they can make. When I lived in New York City, they could literally make all of the mechanical noises. You would hear starlings doing cars backing up and car alarms. And if anybody is old enough to remember the sound of a dial-up modem, they could do that, and I've seen it happen. So they can make really cool noises. More often nowadays, it's like cell phone rings, right? Crazy rings. They're quite the mimic. They make really fun noises. And they're really beautiful. They just get a bad rap because in this country, not being from here, they've taken over some habitat for some others, but they're really, really beautiful, especially spring when they get that iridescent all over. Very cool bird. All right. Get into some headbangers now where we get to some really loud noises, and that is the woodpeckers, right? I love this picture. I would love to see this. It's one of the best ways to learn visually the difference between hairy and downy woodpecker, because in a book or without knowing the size, if you've never seen them before, they look almost the same. But when you see them together, you can see that size difference. One of the tricks to telling them apart, if you do see them, is look at the size of the beak. It's fully the same size as the rest of the head on the hairy, the big one. If you look at the downy and if you took just the size of the beak, it would barely make it halfway through the head, right? So if you kind of judge that, that's a great way to tell which is which. Or if it's sitting on a feeder, like this is a suet feeder right here, the hairy is always bigger, like tail would stick off, wing would stick off, where the downy can almost fit inside the suet feeder. They're so small. Now I need to pull up my phone because I'm going to make these noises for you. Both of these birds make almost the identical noise, but because this one's bigger, it sounds bigger and louder, but it's almost the same noise. I'll play it for you. So these can be tricky to tell if you don't see the bird, which one it is, but there are ways to tell. So let's see. In the spring, they both do a whinny call that sounds a little like this. This is a downy woodpecker. Now the book will tell you that the hairy woodpecker does the same thing, but it's just more strident. If you know what that means, right? But literally it's the same call. And then they also do these tweet noises. Something I want to point out is downy woodpeckers and all the others, the reason I put the headbanger title up there, is in the spring, they're not only poking into trees with those amazing skulls that they have for food and or a new hole, they drum, especially the males, but the females do as well, for territory and for mates. So that's a little downy, and they always drum in really short patterns. It's almost never over 5 or 6. It's always less than that. So if you hear a really short diddle-diddle-diddle and it's over, the other bigger woodpeckers tend to do a lot more, like it's a lot longer length of drumming. So if you hear a woodpecker drumming but you can't see it, doesn't mean we can't figure it out. Really short and fast, probably a downy woodpecker. Real quick, I want to play for you the hairy and see if you can hear the difference in the tweak. Do you hear how it's just kind of bigger and louder? The best way I can describe it is it just sounds like it comes from a bigger throat, which it does. And so it has more resonant to it. It's the same kind of note. It's just bigger. So it's like if you have one kid singing a note who's 5 years old and you have a 15-year-old singing the exact same note, most likely the 15-year-old could sing that note louder. That's the way I describe it. But they're tricky, so definitely getting a picture would be best, but it doesn't mean we can't figure it out if we hear them. Really fun to watch, though. Also, downies are much more common, especially at feeders and in backyards. Haries tend to like more fully wooded areas a little away. Like they'll still be in suburbs, but not as common as the downies. All right. Northern flicker. This is also one you should not miss right now. They are just loving the soft soil as this ground is thawing out, because they love to eat off the ground much less than they do, or much more than they do on a tree like the other woodpeckers, because they love to eat ants. But they are also really, really noisy at this time of year. So I'm going to pull up this one. Northern flicker. And sometimes they will keep doing this on and on and on and on and on. See, he really was ready to go. And speaking of a woodpecker that likes to drum, northern flickers are very, very notorious for using some of the big utility poles or people's own siding. If you have aluminum siding or aluminum chimney, like, or exhaust pipes, the males have learned to use those to sound even tougher and bigger, because it's a nice big hollow noise if you pound on that. So, but the only sound you can get their call, though, that loud kiki noise mixed up with, would be the larger pileated woodpecker. We don't have very many of those in this area, but that also sounds a little bit more jungly, and it's shorter and it goes down, like it goes, trails off. So, red-bellied woodpecker can look similar with a quick look, but once you get a closer look, you'll see where the spots are on the back here and they're underneath here. This is not a red-headed woodpecker, right? We do have red-headed woodpeckers, but they're not here quite yet. They will be migrating back, and they have an all red head, the face and everything. These are red-bellied. It's not very red. You've got a male here coming out of the nest. Female does not have the red in between the beak and the back of the crown. They make some really fun noises, though, and also are really talkative this time of year. So I'm going to play this one because you will probably be hearing it around. There we go. So one noise they make that I can do is they sound a little bit like the squirrel talk, right? Squirrels make this fun little, and so do red-bellied woodpeckers. It's like a chuck noise. I always feel like they're laughing at me, like I've just fallen on the trail and it's been laughing at me, but that's just me. But the song that they're famous for is called the quirr, or it sounds like kind of you put the word of Q-U-R-R-R-R-R together. I always sound, I gotta listen to it, but I think I have a different word for it. Right, that's the one they're famous for. I don't know, I don't hear the Q like the book says. I just think they're going blurp, blurp. they're just happy and they're yelling blurp for some reason. But again, that's my ears. If that's not what you hear, write down what you hear. But that is definitely a sound that you can hear if you've got a red-bellied woodpecker around. I want to play their drums for you because it should be different. Do you hear how much lower that is? That's on a more hollow wood. But it's also like 8 or 9. They get a bunch of them in there fast. Right? That downy has a much slower pace, but not as many. But the faster and more hits is the bigger woodpeckers. I find them fascinating because not only do they not get concussions from banging on the wood that much, but like their tongue is back here. Right? Did you guys know that? Woodpeckers have such long tongues with a barbed tongue so that they can stick it into the wood, into the hole to get like larvae, like that it wraps up in a coil back here and then goes shooting way out there. It's insane. So cool. I know that has nothing to do with bird sound, but it's cool. All right. couple of other very common birds that come to your feeders, and then we're going to take a quick break, see if anybody's got some immediate questions. Black-capped chickadee, definitely a local bird around here, will come to the feeders, and pretty famous for its name, right? Named after one of the sounds it makes, chickadee-dee-dee. And I believe the more DDDs, the more severe the alarm. So if it's just that guy feeding again, it might just be chickadee, right? Just two. But if it's a serious like hawk in the air that they're really afraid of, can we chickadee? It's a whole bunch of them, right? But that's not the song, right? Both the male and the female can make the chickadee noise. That's their like alarm call. And again, just like blue jays, if you hear a bunch of chickadees making that noise, look and see what's up. You might see something cool, like a fox or up in the air, some cool hawk. But they sing a song, and the book will tell you a lot of times that it's, hey, sweetie. That's what I learned when I was a kid. And I was like, that's gross, right? I was a kid. I thought love was disgusting, right? Back then. So I just thought it sounded like he was saying cheeseburger, and I've kept it ever since. Food is my second favorite thing after birds, so I thought it would work. But right, if you've heard it, if you know the sound that he makes, the song, it sounds like this. Right? It's that perfect little second, right? It's almost a third in music if you know them. It's sometimes hard to hear the 3 syllables. It sounds just like toot, dee, doot. But there's usually a second one. That last note is 2 in there. But yeah, again, this points out that if you hear a bird a certain way, I had a good friend for many years when I was out on the East Coast who was hard of hearing, wore hearing aids, but could hear some things. And it was really fun to hear birds through his experience because it was very different, right? It was so interesting to have him describe what is that bird-like sound to you, so that we could compare, like, and write it down and like make sure like we were both hearing the same bird and stuff, because it's very cool. Another one that's definitely around the feeders, if you've got feeders in your yard, is the white-breasted nuthatch. I always thought that they sound more like the Roadrunner than Roadrunners really sound like the cartoon Roadrunner, right? They kind of do go meep, meep. They've got this little meep, 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 meep noise that they do. Also, if you see one and it's going down the tree, it's a nuthatch. You could have red-breasted nuthatches around still if you are in a certain part of the country, but we see white-breasted nuthatches the most around here, especially in the spring. We tend to see red-breasted more in the fall and winter. Really fun birds. And then American goldfinch, another one of my favorites because they say another food-related item, which is potato chip. This is not their song, but when they fly, they kind of have this dipping pattern. If you can see my hands, they kind of dip when they fly like this. And as they dip, they say, and it sounds like the words potato chip. At least it does to me. And they have a gorgeous little song, very similar to their cousin, the house finch. And I'm going to play this one for you because, again, it's one that is so pretty. I can't quite do it justice. Goldfinch. And the males right now are really singing, although they nest very late in the season. So even though American goldfinches are starting to sing now, the males will continue to get brighter spring plumage all the way through almost June and July to be the brightest, because goldfinches nest really late. So many other birds are nesting in May. They wait till June or July because they like to use thistle fluff and thistle seed so much, and the thistle doesn't bloom that early. So a lot of times they'll wait. Let's play a lovely goldfinch song for you. So very similar to the house finch, but a little just more like tiny and tinny, I always feel. It's like a little tinkling song, right? Where the house finch or the house wren might be bubbly. It's a little fuller. The goldfinch sounds smaller, almost like a little metal toy singing up there in the tree. I wanted to sign the one other sound. They make a Z noise once in a while too, when they sit. I don't think it's on my. Yeah, that. They make lots of fun noises. And of course, all of these birds probably make more noises than I or the phone could ever record. It's one of the fun things about, I think, birding and watching birds is sometimes just sitting down with a bird that you feel you know well. For example, I have what I believe, they're not banded, so I don't know for sure, but a pair of robins that are on their 3rd year nesting on my rain gutter. Good bet that it's the same pair since it's the same place. But it's really fun to just like kind of feel like that they're my old pals and I can see like what they're up to. They're really poorly making this nest this year. I don't know what's up. So I'm wondering if one of them is a new member. One of them was literally just throwing the stuff at the rain gutter and not placing. And I'm like, that's not doing much, dude. So I don't know. We'll see how they do. All right. How are we on time, Allie? Oop, we're getting near the end.
We are. Do you want to do a couple minutes and then we have a few questions in the chat?
Yeah, I'm going to zip through these last ones and we'll have time for questions in just a sec. I'm going to skip through these last ones fast because I want to get to a couple right at the end. So there are several sparrows or little brown jobs, little brown birds around. Here are 3 to watch for. Chipping sparrow sounds like a tiny little, if you know, remember an old landline, like a little phone ring, like a little tiny one, like if Barbie and Ken had a phone. It's just a little tiny phone ring. Song sparrows have a beautiful song, but it's usually the same rhythm. The cool thing about song sparrows is you can learn them in your area and then move just a state or two away or to a different region, and they have a totally different dialect. It's so crazy. So song sparrows are both common, but also really tricky to learn their songs. And I threw in clay-colored sparrow because they're about to migrate through here, and I just love any bird that doesn't sound like a bird, and he sounds like a big bug. It was awesome. I had to convince a whole bird walk once that it was a bird making the noise. They all thought it was some sort of cricket, and it was a clay-colored sparrow. There are a bunch of blackbirds around. I'm not going to play Red-Winged Blackbird because I bet you all know that song, right? It's famous, Conqueree. But don't forget, she makes noises, right? Female Red-Winged Blackbird, one of the most misidentified birds in the world. Like, just people don't know what it is. You don't see her much, but they're really beautiful. And she makes some really cool noises. And she's got a loud alarm call that I bet you've heard. And while I keep moving ahead, I'm going to find it for you. Red winged. There it is. I think it's on here. Female call. Is it this one? Yeah, that kind of descending whistles. That's the female blackbird, and she makes that a lot when she's on a nest and she's just a little angry, like food hasn't arrived yet, or the babies are like tugging at her something. Something's too close to her nest. It's a pretty common noise from them, but I think it gets overlooked because you don't always see her making it. And common grackles, I love them. They're big, they're loud, they're noisy, and that's how I write what they say. I don't think there's a real mnemonic, but it's literally right? It's just crazy. I'm going to let you do this one on your own. Brown-headed cowbirds. If you haven't looked up their video of them when they sing, I certainly can't do it with my mouth. They can actually sing several notes at once. It's really awesome. But it's just this gorgeous little bubble. And it kind of comes out. 2 that you might see around Lincoln if you're on the outskirts, the 2 meadowlarks. Got to know them by song. That's the best way, because trying to tell if there's white here or yellow here is really hard. But they do sound very different. Eastern is really high. Usually goes down like that in the spring of the year. It's really whiny. Whereas the Western one kind of is lower and goes all over. Like that. All right. There's a bunch more birds, but we are, oh, I'm on the last slide, so I'm just going to mention those. There's lots more coming in May. Killdeer, you can't miss that one. Orioles are coming. Thrashers could confuse you. But let's wrap it up with some fun questions. I'm going to unshare so we can see and hear people and look at the chat. What's in the chat?
Okay, so we have a question from William Kelly. He asked, once you hear a bird's sound, do you have any tips for identifying the bird's location so you can then ID it?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to start with one that we teach little kids. And I think once you've done it as an adult only once or twice, like you'll get the point. It can be tricky, but use a sound map. And as simple as taking a piece of paper with you and drawing a circle, put yourself in the center of it, and then try to draw where you thought you heard the sound, right? And then see if that area is where you can find it. Because finding the bird is important. Having a search image, one of the best things I try to tell people is if you see a bird singing, even if you know it really well, watch it sing for a while. People have search images. Our brains memorize that way. And like if you can hear and really like get that in your brain, it will be hard to forget later if you really watch a bird sing. So, and also learn the locals, learn the common ones. If you know those, then you'll know when you hear something that's not one of them. Good question.
Okay, from Mary, do you have any tips or tricks to keep squirrels out of bird feeders?
Oh, I have tons, Mary. None of them work. I will tell you about a couple that I've been told work. They haven't worked for me very well. My good friend Dave Titterington and the whole team over at Wild Bird Habitat stores here in Lincoln sell safflower. And the squirrels don't like it, and that's true. But my birds haven't seemed to love it as much either. So I still use the other things, and then the squirrels get in. The best is always getting a nice setup. They can be very expensive, and getting the baffles, but it can be really hard. The most effective I've been at keeping squirrels away is giving them their own area. It gets expensive, but like they have some cracked corn over here and several feeders, and then I have the bird feeders I want to watch. Doesn't work because they figured it out, but it worked for a short while.
All right, William would like to know, how can we efficiently ID hawks, particularly when they are soaring in the sky, especially since they have different morphs?
Yes, so you're totally correct. It can be very tricky, so camera is always great, and I'm terrible at that because I never have mine. If you have the patience, learning how to digiscope with your phone, if you've got a phone, through either a scope or through your binocular, like one lens of the binocular, can help. There's also a really great book. It helped me with Hawks in Flight, and that's actually what it's called. And I want to say it's by a couple of ornithologists. Is it by Peter Dunn? Does anybody, someone online might know. I'm going to look it up right now. Hawks in Flight, but that's the title. Who's it by? Peter Dunn. I was right. Yay. Peter Dunn and David Allen Sibley. Oh, another famous bird nerd. But yes, that one I highly recommend because they take lots of pictures from under, so you can see how red-tailed hawks, no matter what morph it is, almost always have that leading black line or some view of a little belly band. Like there's things to still look for. Also flight pattern. So I highly recommend that book. And knowing who's local, right? Right now around, if you're in the Lincoln area, there's really only about 2, maybe 3 species you should be seeing. And that way, if you don't think it's any of those, you can start looking at the rarities. You're on mute still, Allie.
Thanks. Rhonda asks, what is a good phone app where she can record songs and then it identifies the bird?
Ooh, I don't think they ever perfected that yet. I wish they had. So someone, when iTunes was first being created, wanted to do a bird one. But I don't think they still have ever perfected it where you can record it, play it, I would say instead have a friend that is really good at bird noises. I get those all the time. I get emails with bird calls. What's this one, Jason? I love them. Please send them my way. I totally give you permission. The other option, and someone just mentioned it on the chat, is use Merlin. Merlin is great for both visuals and sounds where you can describe it and it will help you at least narrow it down. So if you can get it down to a list of 3 or 5 and then you can listen to just those, that helps too.
All right, Katie says she Googled the woodpecker tongue and it's crazy. Are there any other birds that have modified tongues?
Ooh, that's a good question. So hummingbirds as well. Hummingbirds have extremely long tongues, and to get out of those long bills, right? And I believe they're feathery. I think they're very rough and feathery at the end to be able to pick up nectar. A lot of birds have a slight barb in their tongue. I know great-tailed grackles and common grackles have a really big, powerful tongue. I know this from banding. Some birds, unfortunately, if they get caught in a net, will get themselves, they call it tongued, where the barb gets hooked there, and then it's hard for them to breathe. So you have to be very careful to get that out of there so they're not choking themselves. I would say the woodpeckers, hummingbirds would probably have the most specialized tongues, I would think. There's probably some, cool bird in the jungle that I don't know very well that probably has something really cool too, but those are the ones I can think of.
All right, last question. Aside from listening for blue jay call chaos, what are some good clues for trying to locate owls? Are there habitat or audible clues?
Oh, good one. So knowing when owls breed is the first part. So owls, most around here in this part of the country, are close to done breeding or should be. It's early April, so eastern screech owls could still be calling. And that's one that many people, even who know birds, forget to listen for or don't realize they're hearing an owl because it doesn't sound like an owl. Ooh, that's going to be our last bird song of the night, Allie. I'm pulling it up. But eastern screech owls with that crazy little, I'll try to do it actually. It's like a little whinny. It's a little higher than I can do. And then they also do one that's just a tremolo. So some people will hear it just after dusk and not know that was an owl. But for great horned owls and barred owls, they're a little earlier in the year. Listening from like November through February or March, like is when you want to listen for them because they don't hoot as much once they've got like little ones growing and like they don't have to like, call for mates as much. Doesn't mean they can't. Barred owls will talk during the day at any time. If you're in the Lincoln area, Wilderness Park is a great place to go walking for them. And then it's just if you don't, another way to find owls and like if you're interested in them is to use eBird because not only can you put your own bird sightings in there, you can see where other folks have seen birds. And if you're interested, you can find owls and kind of be in that area. At least you're in an area where you know they are and you might be able to hear them. That's kind of what I do. Good questions, everybody.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to go ahead and throw up this link in the chat for the City Nature Challenge. And so if you want to learn more information about the City Nature Challenge or to see the rest of the speaker series and sign up for them, you can go ahead and visit that website and that has all the information.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Allie, for the invite. This was so much fun. Definitely participate in the City Nature Challenge. And we've got some great speakers coming up on fungus and mammals and bugs, all kinds of fun stuff.
Great. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.